Chapters 3 and 4 of A Fool There Was by Porter Emerson Brown. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 3. Two Boys and a Girl. To the budding mind of young Jack Schuyler, life was a very pleasant affair. It began each morning at 6:30, and from then on until 8 at night, there was something to fill each moment. He didn't care for school particularly. Still, it wasn't difficult enough to cause much discomfort. The natal pains of study were not by any means unbearable, inasmuch as he was quick to see and to understand. And furthermore, he was possessed of a retentive memory. In his classes, he assumed a position of about 8 from the 4, and he maintained it with but little fluctuation. In the out-of-door sports of small boys, he was usually first. That is, when Tom Blake wasn't. When Tom Blake was, Jack Schuyler was second. He was a sturdy boy, active, quick, strong of limb and of body. He had earnest, serious eyes of gray-blue, like those of his father. His mouth and chin were delicate, like his mother's, and he was thoughtful rather than impulsive. Tom Blake, on the other hand, was impulsive rather than thoughtful. He had dark eyes and ruddy cheeks, and at the age of 9 he had learned to walk on his hands in a manner that caused acute envy to rankle in the bosom of every boy in the neighborhood. Also, as is unusual among boys of whatever station, color, or instinct, he was self-sacrificing, and more than generous, and loyal to a fault. Catherine Blair was all that might have been expected of a daughter of her father and mother. Had you known them, it were difficult to describe further. You have been told that she was lithe and dainty and very pretty, and she was feminine, very, and yet not unhoyandish, for she played much with Jack Schuyler and Tom Blake. She was natural and unaffected and whole-souled and buoyant, quick to laughter, quick to tears, with an inexhaustible fund of merriment and of sympathy. Of an afternoon in early December, they lay, these 3 young animals, sprawling upon the great room in Blake's house, the room that had been made for play. The gentle rays of the early setting sun streamed in through the broad windows upon a tumbling heap of discarded playthings, and upon a floor strewn with that which might have appeared to be drifting snow, but which in reality was feathers, for there had been a fierce pillow fight, and one of the pillows, under the pressure of rolling little bodies, had burst. Its shrunken shape lay in a far corner of the room, rumpled, empty, a husk of the plump thing that it had been but a short time before. Catherine Blair, with slender stockinged legs thrust out before her, was picking from the tangled masses of her gold-brown hair little clinging bits of down. Tom Blake, beside her, lay flat upon his back, and by him was Jack Schuyler, his head resting upon the heaving diaphragm of the other. At length Jack Schuyler sat up, looking about him. "Whew!" he whistled. "It looks like a snowslide. We'll catch it now." Tom Blake rolled over on his stomach. He shook his head. "Don't worry about that," he said. "Dad won't care, nor Mother. Besides, you're my guest, you know. What shall we do now?" Catherine Blair said, "I want to get these feathers off first. They stick terribly. Every time I think I've got hold of one, I find it's a hair." She shifted so that her back was toward Tom Blake. "Help me, Tom," she commanded. Obediently, he rose to his knees. Resting his left hand upon her shoulder, he plucked, with clumsy masculine fingers, at the bits of white hair that nestled in her hair. She gave a little cry. "Ouch! That hurts, Tom." I guess I'd better wait until I get home and have Harris do it. Harris isn't pretty, but she's awfully good, and she does fuss a bit." She turned around suddenly, violet eyes wide with excitement. "Oh, I forgot to tell you," she cried. "Dr. Delancey said that maybe he'd bring me a baby brother today." Tom Blake and Jack Schuyler both turned to her. "He did?" they cried, almost together. She nodded profoundly. "Yes," she said. "That's why they sent me over here to get all mussed up with feathers. You know baby brothers are bashful. Dr. Delancey told me all about it. They like to be all alone in the house with their mothers so that they can get acquainted." Jack Schuyler rose up on his elbows. "I know a boy," he said, "that was promised a baby brother and all he got was a sister. I don't think that was square, do you?" Tom Blake looked out the window thoughtfully. "I don't know," he remarked at length, judiciously. "It might not have been the doctor's fault. Sometimes they get 'em mixed, I guess. And anyhow, sisters aren't so bad. I wish I had one right now. One like you, Catherine." He turned on her eyes, in which were the frank liking and admiration of boyhood. She tossed the tumbled braids of her hair back over her shoulders. "I'd rather be a boy myself," she said. "They don't have to wear dresses and things. And people don't give them dolls when they'd rather have rocking horses. I wish they'd hurry and bring that brother. I'm just wild to see it." Jack Schuyler sat up. "Well," he assured her, "they'll send over for you when it comes. What shall we do now?" He waited patiently for suggestions. Tom Blake and Catherine Blair sat, foreheads grooved in thought. At length Jack Schuyler cried suddenly, "I know! Let's play leopard shooting. I saw a picture of one in the geography. It looked just like Fiddles." Fiddles was the plethoric Maltese member of the Blake family. "We've got those tin guns, and we can stalk it. What do you say?" That which they said was later evidenced, for when Thomas Cathcart Blake entered the front door of his residence that night and started up the stairs, he was met by an excited feline, followed by 3 equally excited children. And the cat, on seeing him, its cosmogony disrupted to such an extent that it felt itself no longer able to distinguish friend from foe, tried to turn back, with the result that its first pursuer fell over it. There was the added result that the next 2 pursuers tripped upon the sprawling form of the first, and Thomas Cathcart Blake had great difficulty in preventing himself from joining the sprawling parade that tumbled past him to the foot of the stairs and lay at the bottom, a heap of tossing legs and arms and ribbons and fur. Chapter 4. The Child and the Stranger. It is of necessity that a story such as this should be episodical, lapsical, disconnected. Its inception lies in 2 countries and of different people, and it is, in its beginnings, a story of contrasts. So one may be permitted again to say, at a time when pompous, ponderous, white-whiskered, black-suited old Dr. Delancey was engaged in bringing to the daughter of Catherine Blair a posthumous baby brother that, in the mystery of things, turned out after all to be a sister, a stranger chanced to be riding at dusk through the deep shades of the Bois du Nord in Brittany. The path was overhung with spreading boughs. It was tumbled with the wood litter of a decade. His horse went slowly, lifting each forefoot daintily and placing it carefully, and the stranger permitted the animal to take its own time. At length he came to a turning. The huge bole of a great oak was at his left. He rounded it. His horse raised its head, nostrils distended, eyes alert, and stopped. The stranger looked up. It was a strange picture that met his eyes. At first he did not believe that that which he saw was human. It seemed like some nymph of the wood, for there are nymphs in the Bois du Nord, you know, many of them. Anyone who lives there will tell you that. But his eyes fell upon a tumbled heap of clothing, and he knew that it was not a nymph after all, for nymphs do not wear clothing. There was a little woodland pool before him. The sun, straining through the great heavy-leafed boughs, specked it with blots and blotches of gold. Beside it there sat the figure of a girl, naked. She sat there, her slender legs beneath her slender body leaning upon one rounded white arm. Great masses of dead black hair fell about her glowing shoulders, half covering the arm which supported her. Her other hand clasped her knee. Her dark eyes were gazing before her toward the trunk of the oak. The stranger felt that she knew that he was there, and yet she had not looked at him. On the bole of the oak was a squirrel. It was motionless, as though carved out of the trunk itself. Beneath it lay coiled a snake. Its eyes were fastened upon those of the squirrel, and its flat, ugly head was moving gently to and fro, the while its forked tongue playing back and forth between its fangs. They waited there, the stranger and the naked girl. They waited for a long, long time. By and by, the squirrel moved a little. One forefoot crept slowly down the bark of the oak, and then the other. The one hind foot, and then its mate. And the squirrel was nearer to the snake. Again they waited, the stranger and the naked girl. The squirrel crept yet further down the trunk toward the slow shifting venomous head. The horse snorted. The squirrel raised its head and darted up the tree trunk. It was gone, and the snake slid noiselessly off into the underbrush. The naked girl turned dark, deep eyes upon the stranger. She seemed not to mind her nakedness, and to him it seemed not strange that she should not. The horror of it all was deep within him. He murmured beneath his breath, "Good God!" Then he spoke to her, a muttered word, a meaningless word. She swung her body over, sinuously, so that she faced him, slender legs half stretched. The dead black hair rippled over budding breasts. She did not answer. She merely looked at him. The stranger sat there. His eyes blinked a little. He brushed his hand across them, weakly. Then he looked at her again. Came a sudden rustling in the brush beside him. His horse leaped forward, almost unseating him. He had gone far down the trail before he reined it in. Then he crossed himself. His eyes showed that he was frightened. There was a turning in the path, a turning that led to the main road. The stranger swung his horse into this turning. He knew that it added to the length of his journey by a good league and a half, and yet he took that turning. And later, as he turned into the traveled road, he breathed a deep, deep sigh, and again he crossed himself. End of chapters 3 and 4.